I'd like to talk to you about fear. Offer some advice on it. And like my advice is my advice. You take it or you leave it. You might not agree with it, and so therefore, if you don't agree with it, don't take it. If you do agree with it, take it. My nan always used to say, always be wary of people that charge you for advice, but always be patient with those who offer it for free. I've always found that to be a good lesson in life. But I'd like to talk to you about what I understand of fear and how it works. Back about 12 years ago now, I'd say, I was going out with a girl and she was a corporate banker for RBS. And she said that there was a guy that was going around buying up Royal Bank of Scotland shares for half of their price. Let's just pretend, hypothetically, that a share in Royal Bank of Scotland was £1, and he was going around to people saying, "I'll take them off your hands for 50p." And so people, and I said, like, surely he's not getting any buyers for that. And she said, he is absolutely getting buyers. And I said, well, why would people sell their shares for half of their original value? And he said, she said, because they're scared and he isn't. That's it. His notion was, or his idea was that because other people were scared and he wasn't, he was trying to profit from that. He was trying to take something from somebody to get them to sell themselves short. You always look at all the worst people in the world. They always rely on some degree of fear, and that's how they get people to sell themselves short. And so you think of not necessarily in terms of monetary value, but think of things that have other senses of value, like spiritual value or well-being value. So your freedom, for instance, people give up their freedom because they're afraid. They're afraid that if they don't give up their freedom, they'll lose more in the long run. And it was like those people, the reason why they sold their shares for half the price was because they thought that the bank would be going bust by the morning. And so people will then, willingly give something up or willingly sell themselves short or denude something of its value if they have a fear that by not doing so, the consequences would be so much worse. When in reality, the bank wouldn't go bust, and that fear was never realised. But of course, that guy's got their money now, so he doesn't particularly care whether they're afraid or not. It's that's how these things work. But you see, the thing is that if those people weren't afraid, if they weren't in a state of fear, if they weren't in a state of anxiety, they wouldn't have sold themselves short, and they would have had a full appreciation of the value of what they had, i.e. the shares. So I often think that it's sometimes when people are doing something, you get a knee-jerk reaction to do something, and usually the most stupid outcomes of things have been because people have been afraid. I had a girlfriend about 5 years ago. She was a Parisian. She was a lawyer, and she was quite a bit older than me. She was about 16, 17 years older than me, and she would do the most stupid things, like massively stupid stuff, that would end up like. She always thought that I was going to leave her, that she was just a stepping stone for me. Well, I was genuinely quite happy in the relationship. But as a result of that fear, it caused her to do things and to act in a certain way that would ultimately be the death of a relationship. So say for instance, years ago, when people would check each other's phones, for instance, they do that out of a fear that the other person is doing something that will ultimately lead to the breakdown of the relationship, which it seems to the person that's doing it, they think, oh, I'm being a bit clever, nobody else has thought of this. But in actual fact, because it's based on fear, it reduces the ability, it reduces intimacy in the relationship. It reduces people having their private space, because they're in a state of fear. The other thing that I would say, the final thing that I would say about fear is that when somebody is afraid, they're not themselves. They aren't thinking straight, they aren't acting rationally, they are not themselves. I think that when it comes to physical and sexual intimacy, for instance, is that's when you truly get to know somebody, because it's the one time that they are completely discharged of any fear, of any stress, and it is just them in their most natural state. When people are afraid, they're not themselves. It's recognizing, I think, a lot of it, that people don't think straight. That when somebody is afraid, they panic. So say for instance, somebody, when all the panic buying was going on 3 months ago, and people were buying toilet rolls and stuff like that, and pasta and all sorts, and panic buying, they weren't themselves at that point. They might ordinarily have been one of the most rational people that you could meet, but suddenly, you come home and you see your next door neighbour coming in, and he's got a massive stockpile of toilet rolls for some reason. Why toilet rolls? Why pasta? I don't know, but it's a reaction that is based on fear. Somebody will not project who they truly are if they are in a state of fear. So when somebody has a fear about losing their job, or losing a relationship, or losing where they live, or losing a friend, they don't normally act rationally. It's like I was saying about the whole phone checking thing. That's why a partner will check a phone, because he or she has a completely massive fear of losing that person, and it is the fear that they are acting on rather than being themselves. You let yourself shine through. Somebody either loves you or they don't. It's the way that it is. But if somebody is in a state of fear, they're not themselves. They're not acting rationally. And so, how is it that we deal with fear? How is it that we process it? How is it that we reject it? Well, fear has two purposes. One is that it is an inhibitor. So it stops you from doing things. So, I won't ask that girl out because she might say no, and I'm afraid of how that would make me feel. Or it acts as like a keeper. I'm afraid of heights, and I'm afraid of heights for a very good reason. My brain says to me, this is not a situation that you should be in. I identify factors of this situation with you coming to some harm, and so therefore don't do it. It is a great keeper, and it serves that purpose, but it is also an inhibitor, and it stops you from doing things as well. I think it's about processing the fear, and before acting rashly or quickly or in a panicked way, process the fear first. I can't give you advice on how to do that. That's the £1 million question. How do you get somebody to face and process their fears? I genuinely couldn't tell you. I personally like to sit down and have a think. Is my fear of this rational? Is my fear of it rational? Should I process it a little bit more? Or, I'm a Catholic, and it says in the Bible, 365 times, it says, don't be afraid, be not afraid, words to that effect. And so it's kind of like it's taking time to sit down and process your emotions and your fear in relation to that, before acting on it. But I think the first part of that is identifying that you are in a state of fear, that you are in a state of anxiety, because you can't solve a problem unless you recognise that there actually is one. And that's the first part of it, is identifying when you're in a state of fear before acting on it. In the words of the immortal Jerry Springer, take care of yourselves and each other.